we'll start with this. Well, veteran commentator Al Bernstein, in reference to the Mikhail Fox versus Maestre fight, took place on Saturday night. He had this to say. He says, I just watched Maestre versus Fox. I never make statements like this, but that terrible decision was pure WBA corruption. And the three judges, John Mariano, Gloria Martinez, and Daniel Singh, should never judge another professional boxing bout. This sentiment expressed from Al Bernstein is widespread. Many people share in that opinion. It's just another example of how boxing is the most bent professional sport of professional sports.
Bad scorecards happen all the time, man.
Even at the highest levels of professional boxing, it's not uncommon to see a scorecard that doesn't adequately reflect a contest. I mean, look at the scorecard for Charlo versus Castaño from Nelson Vasquez.
117, 111.
I don't see how a professional judge scores fights could have had it that way in either direction for either man, either Brian Castaño or Jermall Charlo. And this is what goes on.
The draw in DeGale versus Jack.
The draw in Wilder versus Fury. The draw in Charlo versus Castaño. And the decision win for Gabriel Maestre over Mikhail Fox, who many people believe did more than enough to have won the fight and managed to score a knockdown throughout the course of it.
Al Bernstein calls it corruption.
And you know what? Maybe it is. Bad card happens from time to time.
Everywhere.
Though isolated incidents aside, there's a pattern, a prevalent pattern with how fights get scored over there on PBC's Isolation Island.
Bernstein calls it corruption.
That's how Al Bernstein chooses to characterize it, and he actually calls fights for the PBC. And, maybe the reason is because it's not just one bad judge this time. This time it's all three. John Mariano, Gloria Martinez Rizzo, and David Singh all scored the fight for Gabriel Maestre. The outcry for the scoring from this fight seems worse even than the outcry that we saw for the Rolly Romero versus Marinez fight, a fight that a lot of people felt Rolly Romero lost.
Just not in the eyes of the judges.
At first glance, what I'll tell you is that it seems more and more that the boxing fans, the boxing community at large, is disagreeing
the judges
regularly with how fights are scored over there on PBC's Isolation Island.
And context is key.
For the spastics out there that need you to hold their hand through every single fucking comment, that's not saying that bad scorecards only happen on PBC Island so much as they're happening more frequently. You're hearing more and more about it.
More often.
It's getting to the point where it's almost farcical. It's getting to the point where it doesn't even seem like a professional sport anymore. It doesn't seem like a contest. These scorecards...
They must be filling them out at home and turning them in after the fight.
Scoring in boxing being as subjective as it is, there are bound to be disagreements and bound to be discrepancies here and there, but it really does feel like these kinds of disagreements and discrepancies are happening more frequently when it comes to PBC cards, PBC fights, and PBC fighters than all these other outfits that are out there.
Before you go telling me it's my imagination.
Before you call this a narrative that I cooked up, consider that the scoring in this fight must have been particularly bad, that Al Bernstein, who actually commentates for the PBC, chose to characterize this as corruption.
Corruption on a WBA's part.
But corruption nonetheless. And whose fighters, more so than any other stable of fighters, any other outfits fighters out there, whose fighters do we see fighting more and more for WBA trinket titles?
Whose fighters?
The PBC's fighters, that's so. Those of you that have been following this channel long enough will have heard me say this more than once, more than twice, more than thrice, that the PBC and the WBA, there's something going on there.
Why else does Leo Santa Cruz have that featherweight title?
The man hasn't campaigned as a featherweight in 2 whole years, yet the WBA insists on letting him hang on to that featherweight title. Who is that a favor to?
Gervonta Davis likes those WBA Reggie belts.
But he actually holds a full one as well, at 130 pounds. So here you have one guy who's holding 3 different versions of a WBA title at 3 different weights.
I think that's a bit excessive.
Listen, I'm just going to give it to you straight, because it's the only way I know how to give it to you. I myself don't watch very many PBC cards these days. I really don't. Between the soft matchmaking...
It's the one boxing outfit I don't keep up with that much.
And consistently funny-looking scorecards, I don't find myself all that interested in the PBC's programming. Really don't. I mean, just the other day, Michael Polite Kofi was upset by journeyman stand-in Jonathan Rice. I didn't actually watch that card. I tell you guys all the time that Gervonta Davis's last 3 or 4 fights, I didn't watch them.
I didn't care.
Charlo versus Montiel. Caleb Plant versus Caleb Truax. I mean, this is what passes for a championship boxing match over there on PBC's Isolation Island. And the rest of the time, they're trying to qualify Reggie titles, Reggie belts, as full titles.
You didn't see him calling Gervonta Davis a 3-division champion?
I mean, the place is a circus. It really is.
I don't watch a lot of their fights.
I didn't watch the last one. I couldn't tell you what happened in Fox versus Maestre, except the same thing I've been seeing and hearing about consistently.
It's the same fucking shit every other card.
From the scoring in Wilder vs. Fury 1, to the scoring in Broner vs. Santiago, to the scoring in Romero vs. Marinez, to the scoring from Rodriguez vs. Gaballo, to the scoring from Charlo vs. Castaño, to last night's scoring with Mikhail Fox and Gabriel Maestre.
It's boxing and bad scorecards happen.
They do seem to be happening more and more frequently over there on PBC's Isolation Island, don't they? It seems like every other card you're hearing about how
The judges got it wrong.
it is becoming more brazen, it is becoming more prevalent, and by now, you should expect it because I do. And that's why I don't watch that fucking shit.
Between the soft matchmaking,
Fighters underperforming in fights they're supposed to win easy.
weirdo scorecards,
I just can't be bothered with it. I really can't. It is very hard for me to take the PBC's brand of boxing, their product, seriously as an actual contest, an actual match, for more reasons than one. When the matchmaking isn't soft as applesauce.
Well, look at these fucking scorecards.
You've heard me say this more than once, that I view the PBC's brand of boxing as an inferior product. Inferior to Top Rank. Inferior to Matchroom and DAZN. Inferior even to Golden Boy Promotions, who doesn't have all that big a stable, but when they put a card on, it's actually very entertaining.
PBC's bottom of the barrel.
And every so often they put on a decent fight, a halfway decent fight, but these are the kinds of fights that I get on a regular basis by way of Top Rank and ESPN. And they wouldn't dream of billing a fight like Ruiz versus Areola as a pay-per-view. For Christ's sakes, they gave us Lomachenko versus Lopez on regular ESPN, along with Taylor versus Ramirez. So you'll excuse me for saying so. That I don't lose sleep over how fights are scored on PBC Island because I barely watch.
I don't watch a lot of that shit.
And you shouldn't either, if it bothers you that much. You don't want to acknowledge the established pattern that we're seeing here. That's just your fucking prerogative. But as far as I'm concerned, you're gonna have to do a lot better than that to get my attention.
Oh, so another guy got shafted on PBC Island. What else is new?
And those are my thoughts on that entire situation. Those are my thoughts on that entire fiasco. We've yet to see what the WBA's president, Gilberto Mendoza, is going to do himself. He took to social media and stated, the review of the fight was ordered immediately. Based on the preliminary scorecards received, indicates a direct rematch could be ordered. The judges, who were also accepted by the Minnesota Commission, will be interviewed individually.
Damage is already done, though, isn't it?
Ordering a rematch in a fight that Mikhail Fox should have won, should have been awarded the decision. Ordering a rematch between Mikhail and Gabriel Maestre, that doesn't exactly rectify that problem. That doesn't exactly right that wrong. Mikhail shouldn't have to fight the guy again. The decision, ideally, should simply be overturned.
In an ideal world, it would be.
Though things are seldom ever ideal in the world of boxing. This decision, it's gotten a lot of negative press, a lot of negative attention, and as a result of that, some rather alarming statements from one of the presiding judges that scored the fight. Some alarming statements not directly related to the fight have surfaced as a result of
How the fight was scored.
Understand that all 3 of the presiding judges scored the fight for Gabriel Maestre, they did. But Gloria Martinez Rizzo,
She's become a famous lady.
as stated, the scoring for Fox versus Maestre has gotten a lot of attention, a lot of negative attention, so much so that some alarming tweets from Gloria Martinez have surfaced. Per Corey Erdman, who said, here is a selection of the racist tweets from Gloria Martinez Rizzo, the judge who scored tonight's fight between Gabriel Maestre and Mikhail Fox, 117-110 for Maestre. She seems to have a physical attraction to Trump and disputed election results before joining Parler. For those of you not familiar with Parler, Parler is an American microblogging and social network service. It has a significant user base of Donald Trump supporters, conservatives, conspiracy theorists, and far-right extremists. Posts on the service often contain far-right content, anti-Semitism, and conspiracy theories such as Commey.
There are implications here.
Grave ones for an openly bigoted judge in the sport of boxing who happens to score a fight the way that Gloria Martinez happened to score a fight.
All three judges scored the fight for Maestre.
And all three of them are liable. But it's Gloria Martinez that's gotten special attention because it's Gloria Martinez that feels comfortable enough to call certain people of a certain denomination monkeys.
By way of a Twitter account.
Which has since been deleted, been deactivated since little old Gloria started getting all this attention.
Let's stick to the facts here, people.
And stick to what's important. Gloria Martinez cannot be reprimanded, cannot be penalized for her political affiliations. It's her right as an American to vote for whoever the fuck it is she wants to vote for. That's not the portion of this story that could see Gloria getting in some hot water.
Gloria Martinez deleted a Twitter account for a reason.
She don't want people digging up things she said in the past as ammunition to attack her character, as her character has very recently come under attack since Gloria...
No, she's a bigot.
And what you have to ask yourself is, does the WBA want to be associated with an individual that conducts themselves this way via social media?
How does that reflect on them as an organization?
Because she is one of your judges, after all. How do we know that Gloria's bigoted and prejudicial behavior towards certain individuals of a certain denomination, a certain group, how do we know that those behaviors aren't manifesting in how Gloria scores a fight?
That's the implication here.
These tweets from Gloria Martinez Rizzo have been brought to the attention of none other than Mikhail Fox himself, and he's been quoted as saying that I was never going to win, highlighting the racism and bigotry of one of the judges that just so happened to be scoring his fight. At this point, you can't just sweep this under the rug. You know, bad scoring happens in fights all the time. But because Gloria Martinez Rizzo...
Before hauling tail to Paula.
And before so deciding to deactivate her Twitter account, because so many of her tweets are now surfacing and what bigoted sentiments she has expressed in the past.
Somebody has to answer for it.
Somebody has to pay, namely the WBA, namely Gloria Martinez Rizzo. Because how do we know, and how does Mikhail Fox know, that this woman's bigoted and prejudicial and hateful sentiments don't have everything to do with how she goes in there and scores a boxing match? How do we know?
WBA hired this woman.
You can't have somebody like this going in there and scoring fights. Never mind the identity crisis that Gloria Martinez might be having.
You know, this broad's from Nicaragua? The fucking nerve of this broad.
Identity crisis aside, the WBA cannot have one such as Gloria behaving the way that she behaves, saying the things that she says, presiding over fights and scoring boxing matches. No.
You gotta can this broad.
And if the WBA knows what's good for them, they will before this picks up steam and gets even more attention.
This ain't just about a bad scorecard anymore, sweetheart.
Heads are gonna roll. They better. And finally, per tweet from Mike Coppinger via his sources, Vasyl Lomachenko and Richard Commey are in advanced talks for a December 11th fight at Madison Square Garden on the Heisman Trophy night on ESPN, ESPN Plus. Edgar Berlanga could compete in the chief support bout. And this is what I told you was going to happen. You know, there was some mention by Bob Arum of Vasyl Lomachenko potentially facing Richard Commey and potentially facing Devin Haney. And then, like now, told you, it's going to be Richard Commey because for Bob, who's got a reputation as being a bit of a penny pincher, the cheaper alternative really would be Richard Commey. Devin Haney makes very good money, made very good money fighting Jorge Linares, something to the tune of $3 million. So what's a kid like that going to want for a Vasyl Lomachenko fight? More than Bob Arum is willing to put up, I'd wager.
You think he's gonna fight that guy on the cheap?
Obviously not. I wouldn't hold my breath for a fight between Vasyl Lomachenko, Devin Haney to materialize. It was always going to be Richard, and it was always going to be Loma. And I'm okay with that, because that in and of itself is a very intriguing fight. You got Richard Commey, who's a hard-punching guy. It was Richard Dwyer who said it best of the Gambler's Advisory. Richard Commey is a fastball pitcher. You know, this guy, he's only got one gear.
He only throws one way.
And everything he throws has bad intentions on it. You would have thought that after Richard was brutally knocked out by Teofimo Lopez for what was Richard's IBF title, his then IBF title, you would have thought that behind that brutal knockout, he would have came back a changed man. But we saw Richard Commey rebound off that loss to Lopez with Jackson Marinez, and he looked the part against Jackson Marinez. He stayed in character. He was still the aggressive, strong-punching guy that he's known for being, still committing to his shots. He didn't seem gun-shy at all against Marinez. That's how he got him out of there. And that is particularly interesting because sometimes when a puncher like Richard Commey gets stopped, the way that he got stopped at the hands of Teofimo Lopez, it changes who they are. It affects their confidence level and whether or not they want to continue to commit to their shots for fear that they may get stopped again at the hands of someone else. Whereas with Richard, he was still the same guy. He didn't let the knockout change him.
Yeah, he didn't let it change who he is.
And that's particularly relevant to this conversation, what could be December's card, because that makes Richard Commey a credible threat to Vasyl Lomachenko, that he's not dealing with a guy that's experimenting with a different style. He's not dealing with a guy that's going to lay off. He's dealing with a guy, he could be dealing with a guy that's going to come after him.
He's gonna look for the knockout.
Vasyl Lomachenko did look great in his last outing against Japan's own Masayoshi Nakatani, but the victory was scrutinized a bit because Masayoshi Nakatani had suffered a fractured orbital bone at the hands of Teofimo Lopez. And even though he rebounded off that loss with Felix Verdejo,
He took some lumps in that fight, too.
he had to pick himself up off the canvas before securing the W, before securing that victory. Essentially, Masayoshi Nakatani was a guy who was back in the winner's bracket, but he had been put through the ringer. I dare say that Richard Commey is a more credible threat than Masayoshi was. A more credible threat to Vasyl Lomachenko.
And there's pressure on him.
There's pressure because it's going to be hard to top Teofimo Lopez's knockout victory over Richard.
It's a hard act to follow.
How do you top a highlight reel knockout like that? In December, we're going to find out.
When these two guys meet up, we will.